The wildlife of the mangrove swamp, fish, mollusks, crustaceans, mangrove oysters and others, have fed the region for thousands of years. Like salt gathering, harvesting oysters is equally the work of women. They know the places in the mangroves where the shellfish prospers. Alimatu Sarr runs the oyster fishing women's collective.
We can get down there, and the others here. Careful not to break the branches. It's an extremely hard job, because not only do the women have to crawl under the roots of the mangroves, but they get cut as well. You can see that the oysters are razor sharp. The mangrove is truly a sacred tree, for us just as it was for the old ones. They didn't use knives, they used their hands. The mangrove mustn't be damaged because we know it's the mangrove which gives us the oysters. There's more and more salt. For example, this flesh here, before it was much more consistent than it is now. Really, they're smaller and smaller, and that's not the right size for a normal oyster.
Alimatu Sarr and her group have learned to manage the resource. They've slowed down the rhythm of harvests. For some time now, they've been aware of the risks and make themselves wear lifebelts.
The water's higher and higher, the currents are stronger and stronger, and that causes a lot of accidents. The women sometimes capsize in the sea because the boats are full of shellfish. In one of these villages, 20 people were killed, women and children, who perished at sea.
While they are much appreciated, mangrove oysters aren't the most abundant shellfish of the mangrove swamps. Cockals make up most of the harvests. For several decades, the mudflats where the species lives and reproduces have been shrinking because of the excess salt, and as a result, those that remain are overexploited.
Here, we're with some ladies who are collecting cockles in a place where there are still a lot to put them in a place where there aren't any anymore. These cockles are starting to be overfished, so we're trying to make sure that in the future the daughters of Saloum will still have these shellfish to feed themselves.
Fishing, the harvest of shellfish, and the wood of the mangrove have satisfied the vital needs of communities since prehistory. Such a long length of time suggests that each of these resources has been constantly managed with economy and wisdom.
Here, we're putting the baby cockles that have been taken into a mudflat that was overfished and where there were no more shellfish. From the time we place them, the ballon will be closed to fishing for 6 months. And so that will allow the cockles to adapt to their new environment and develop.
The enormous banks of empty shells, some of which are 100 meters long, aren't deposits, as you might think. They've been deliberately accumulated by local populations to create promontories in the middle of floodable land. Fadiouth is the local historian of Fadiouth Island, known as Shell Island.
How are you? Okay? Here are fresh shells. The flesh has already been taken. They're drying out here and then they'll be used for construction or making mortar.
At Fadiouth, we walk upon a carpet of empty shells several meters thick. Everywhere the prizes of fishing are scattered on the ground. This abundance bears witness to the richness of the delta in which mangroves play a major role.
Those are the types of shells that were once collected, and here are the kind of shells collected nowadays because of the pressure of exploitation and because of the salinization of the water which is pushing back the mangroves.
The effervescent green of the mangroves is now tattered by sheets of black sand impregnated with salt.
Shell Island is an island where there are only shells. The foundation is built of shells, and all the buildings, walls, floors, streets, and even the plaster.
On the neighboring island, tombs of a Muslim and Christian cemetery are hollowed out in a thick layer of empty shells. The massive silhouettes of sacred baobabs watch over the departed. Bringing tombs together in a cemetery is a recent practice. Lots of old tombs are scattered around the edges of the mangroves, often close to a baobab. Archaeologists from the Cheikh Anta Diop University of Dakar, led by Michel Wali Diouf, are excavating ancient shell mounds. Some mounds are more than 7,000 years old. Tombs are found here.
Here we find a human skeleton measuring about 1.75 meters, lying upon a bed of unopened shells.
This bed of unopened shells, which implies the flesh was not consumed, is unusual and intrigues the researcher.
We'd like to know what social rank this skeleton belonged to. Perhaps through our excavations, we'd like to find out who they were. The earth is so salty here that no bones can last, and that's the reason that they thought it necessary to put the corpses, they're dead, in shells, because the shells are composed of calcium, so it was a way of preserving the corpse.
The sifting of the soil of the tomb brings to light fragments of ancient ceramic known as potsherds. And there?
There, that's an edge potsherd.
Edge potsherd.
But the lip is a little small.
What we can get are potsherds, funeral ceramics, because they're found just beside the body. Arrowhead.
Pass me a brush.
That's a fine collection. You could say it splits into several fragments there.
The most important thing is the proximity of the arrow to the skeleton. It's a few centimeters away, more or less. That could quite simply indicate the person belonged to a very important social class.
Very important.
The largest shell mounds are up to 15 meters high compared to sea level, which means that was the amount of shellfish consumed by our ancestors during all that time. It was enormous.
Enorme.
Michel Wali Diouf recently discovered in the heart of the mangrove swamp a completely unknown site, intriguingly large.
It's an enormous site, really vast. It's made up of 100 tombs. All those are grave mounds, funeral chambers.
If the shell mounds are common, sites with an organized array of tombs are rare. Those that have been excavated in the north and midwest of Senegal have been shown to be tombs with funerary offerings. Pottery, weapons, jewels, and sometimes the traces of sacrifices.
I want to keep this site secret because then I can preserve it, restore it as well. And I don't know when or if the funds will be there to excavate it one day.
The shell mounds offer an authentic and exceptional cultural landscape which UNESCO is currently studying. These precious sites are, however, under pressure from several threats. Here, always, the shellfish have been seen above all as a primary resource with many uses. Since the end of the 19th century, the mounds have served as quarries where communities found construction materials.
Here we have a mound that is 15 meters wide, but the population used the shells to build houses and to make lime as well. For that reason, the mound has been completely destroyed, absolutely devastated.
Today, the shell mounds are protected.